The Hurricanes blow away the Canadiens, and the Stanley Cup Final is set. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Saturday, May 30th, 2026. Morren and Smith with you. Little doubt from almost the opening puck drop that Carolina had absolutely no intention of letting up off the gas, and as a result, they gain their first Stanley Cup Final appearance in 20 years.
Carolina got a scoring chance off the opening faceoff, went in seconds into the game, and you saw right away they seemed faster, they seemed much heavier, and they won all the puck battles, and Montreal looked like they were out of gas, and Carolina looked like they just filled their tank.
In addition to that, there were some heavy hearts coming into this game. First of all, for the entire Montreal Canadiens franchise, when we learned of the passing of Claude Lemieux on Thursday, and Lemieux was a player agent who represented Frederik Andersen, the goaltender for the Hurricanes. So a lot of emotion even before the puck drop.
And Freddie Andersen seems to have been, from a distance, closer to his agent than most players and agents. It seemed like this was a huge loss for the goaltender, and the team certainly pregame rallied around their goaltender and really wanted to get him the win.
We're going to have more on Claude Lemieux at the end of this show, but coming into this fifth game, did you think that perhaps Marty St. Louis might try to get Brendan Gallagher into the lineup for a little bit of thrust into the offensive zone and maybe do some of the checking that, quite frankly, the Canadiens were devoid of for much of this series, particularly the last four games?
Yeah, I mean, looking back now in hindsight, in the rearview mirror, Brendan Gallagher would have added an element that the Canadiens didn't have. Other than, I got to say, Josh Anderson, game after game after game, went after them physically. Yeah. But Brendan Gallagher would have also been another annoying guy and probably would have had more legs than the tired Habs.
As you'd mentioned right at the top, Jackson Blake, with a great opportunity, 7 seconds in, missed the net on a 2-on-1. Montreal's best chance probably came up the stick of Juraj Slafkovsky during a power play, but Freddie Andersen, good pad stop. But 9:17 into the period, Taylor Hall gets knocked down by Alexander Texier. He's slow to get up, but manages to get back into the play, and he converts on a Logan Stankoven rebound. Montreal challenges this play for goaltender interference as Stankoven slid into Jakub Dobeš, but the goal was allowed to stand. And Toronto said that the supposed interference had no bearing on Dobeš's ability to make the save. And we have seen many more goals waved off for less.
The most interesting thing to me was that I was watching the feed from TNT, and Henrik Lundqvist, who was a decent goaltender himself, said right away he was stunned that was allowed to stand, because he said when your right leg is inoperable, when you're moving to the left, you can't move. If you can't push off your right leg, you can't get across. Personally, I thought it would be called back. When I saw it a couple of times, I thought, oh, here we go. But this was one of those times, one of those very few times that the video guys with the teams get it wrong. And no matter whether they got it right, they still, in the eyes of Toronto, got it wrong. And now not only do we have a 1-0 lead for the home team, but we got a power play.
The Hurricanes did not convert, but less than 6 minutes later, it's hauled to Stankoven high over the shoulder of Dobeš to make it 2-0. And then 100 seconds after that, it's William Carrier with a long flip out to Eric Robinson for a breakaway goal. It's 3-0. Shots in the first period, 15-4. Attempts, 24-10. And another 3-0 lead for for the second consecutive game. Does this sound familiar?
It does. The only thing is this is in a different country. Last time it happened in Canada and this time in North Carolina. And here we go into the second period in an elimination game with the eliminator having a 3-0 lead.
You look at the first two goals in particular, Neil. The goal by Hall off a neutral zone turnover. The goal by Stankoven off a face-off win. And then the third goal coming off a flip out where Robinson gets behind the defense. So you can see Carolina just managing to do all the little things correctly, and Montreal's got no answer.
No, and again, just referring back to the national telecast in the States, the guys on the desk kept saying about how tired the Montreal Canadiens were after playing all these games and all these periods, as opposed to the few number of games and periods that the Carolina Hurricanes had played. And while you've got to listen to them because they've actually been on the ice and played these games, I still think that Carolina was the superior team, not only because they had more rest. They just look bigger and stronger to me as well. You don't get bigger and stronger because you've had rest. I think it just was the cream comes to the top, and this was Carolina.
And it continued in the second period, 30 seconds in. Jarvis is stopped in alone and then whips on the rebound, but it's 7:19. Another example of that Montreal fatigue. Jake Evans with a turnover, and he just goes right off the ice. Doesn't even turn to look and see where the play is going. And it's Stankoven to Hall. Blake on the rebound. It's 4-0. And then on a power play on a bench minor to the Canadiens, Nikolai Ehlers to Jarvis to Gostisbehere right at the side of the net. And it's 5-0. And this game is in 100% cruise control.
And, you know, at that point, I don't know about you, but I felt sorry for Montreal. It's one thing to lose a series in Game 5. It's another thing to be just getting blown out.
And you're in that locker room between the second and third periods. You got no shot. And you've got 20 minutes to just play out the string. And that's got to be one of the most helpless feelings a team can go
you just
through.
Can't wait for it to be over. Like, you just can't wait for it to be over. Let's get on the bus, get to the charter, and get out of here.
Cole Caulfield did break up Freddie Andersen's shutout attempt with 9:10 left with a power play goal, but Seth Jarvis sealing it with an empty netter with 3:41 left. So, as we mentioned at the top, first finals appearance for the Hurricanes since 2006 when they won the Cup against the Edmonton Oilers. Rod Brind'Amour was the captain of that team, and he's the head coach going to the final this time.
And let's reflect a little bit on that series. I was there for that series working on TV. Of course, it was Craig McTavish was the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers at that point.
Yeah.
They came a lot closer to winning than people remember. It was a pretty close series, but you're right. Rod, never forget his face and the exuberation he had when he held that Stanley Cup. That was done also in Carolina in that same building when they won the Stanley Cups. It took them a long time. It's been, as you said, it's been 20 years. It's been a long time for their captain since he won the Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh 17 years ago.
Just a couple of notes here before we wrap up this part of our show. Hurricanes' second line of Hall, Stankoven, and Blake had 8 points in Game 5. And the Canadiens' top line of Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and Juraj Slafkovsky had 8 points in Game 1 and 2 total in Games 2 through 5, and those both from Caulfield. So you can see the depth clearly of the Hurricanes in this series, and just another reason why they're going to meet the Vegas Golden Knights in the final.
And, you know, I wrote a text to Brian Engblom, the color analyst for Tampa Bay, and I said, must be vomiting watching this, thinking, how did this happen? How are we sitting here? Wouldn't have we given them a better fight than Montreal's giving them? But that's why we play the games, and this is the way it's turned out. Give Montreal all the credit in the world for making the playoffs and putting up a great fight, beating Tampa in Game 7, then beating Buffalo in Game 7. and then going on to win game one in the conference final, losing 4 straight after that. But no shame in the season or the playoffs that the Canadiens had this year. What a great stepping stone for Marty St. Louis and Kent Hughes and the organization. We're going to be watching Le Habitant for a long time.
A surprise appearance in the playoffs last year, win 2 rounds this year. So a continuous step up for the Canadiens, and we'll see how things go for their future. But what about this not touching the conference trophies? It's like poor Bill Daly has to have some sort of complex here because everybody stayed away from him like he was made of plutonium or something. Nobody went near the conference trophy. Obviously, the superstition is going to work for one team, but remember in 94, of course, when your team knocked out the Devils in that 7th game and Mess picked up the trophy. Hey, here it is. It's part of what we do, and we'll pick up the next one when we win the Stanley Cup, and that's certainly what happened.
I just think it's so ridiculous to not touch the trophy. You know, there's 15 other teams that would love to be grabbing that trophy right at that moment, and you don't grab it because of this stupid suspicion that if you touch it. I didn't watch the Vegas Campbell Conference trophy handed out. I shut the TV off, actually, in anger. But I regret.
Yes.
Did they do the same nonsense?
Yeah. I think they were a little bit tighter into Daly than the Hurricanes were. It was almost like the Daly at BO or something because they were so far back from him. It's like they didn't want to be within 10 feet of the trophy.
It was almost, too, like they wanted everybody in their organization. Maybe the whole state of North Carolina was out there to get their picture taken with it after they got it. But that whole thing about not touching the trophy is nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. I'm a superstitious guy, too, because I grew up in hockey. So we all are superstitious in some way, shape, or form. But, I mean, come on. You haven't been able to have that trophy for the Carolina Hurricanes in 20 years. Don't you think it's about time you touched it?
You would have thought so. Did you have a Calci bet, by the way?
Did I have a
as to whether or not it would
No.
be touched?
I don't do that. I'm not a gambler.
And we will have the complete schedule for the Stanley Cup Final between the Hurricanes and the Golden Knights at the end of the show. As we mentioned at the top, some heavy hearts on Friday evening after the passing of Claude Lemieux, 4-time Stanley Cup winner. Dead of an apparent suicide. On Thursday, he was found inside of a warehouse of the family-owned furniture business in Florida. Neil, we saw him bring the torch into the Bell Center prior to Game 3 on Monday. He looked vibrant. He looked happy and was just trying to rally the team. To hear this news 72 hours later was beyond shocking.
Oh, it absolutely stunning to anybody who knew Claude Lemieux's career, have watched him, have followed him. I personally knew him, and it's stunning. And it's so sad. You know, he has his son, Brendan, that played for the Rangers and played for the Kings and a couple other teams who, you know, I just watched within the last decade play and thought, oh, I wonder if he's going to play like his dad, Claude, who's such a pain in the butt to every team that he played against. He was so intense. Like a lot of things that happen in life, and particularly in this sport, because everything is magnified. It's just a very sad time.
We had no indication of the type of player that Lemieux was going to become in the NHL. He played 19 games in parts of 3 seasons leading up to the 1986 playoffs. But then burst on the scene with 10 goals, 16 points, 68 penalty minutes in 20 games. He had the overtime winner against Hartford in Game 7, the Adams Division Final, beating Mike Liut with a backhand, and then an overtime winner in Game 3 against the Rangers in the Wales Final. And he scored the only goal of the game midway through the third period of Game 4 against Calgary in the final to give the Canadiens a 3-1 series lead. They would eventually win that series in 5. But during the course of that final, we had seen him dive, agitate, piss everybody off that he possibly could. And during the course of this playoff, he was known equally for heroics and for his antics.
His antics often led to an expiration date for Claude where, it was too much for the team that he was on. And in 1991, he ends up going to New Jersey to become their pain in the ass to other teams.
And then scores a career best 41 goals the following season. And you are now getting a chance to see him up close and personal, being a division rival of the Rangers. What did you see in his game that was so unique and that you always had to be on the lookout for?
Well, just that he was a guy that would take any opportunity to put a hit on somebody, and it didn't necessarily always mean it was going to be clean. He's not unlike Ulf Samuelsson, played in Pittsburgh. They were both guys that you hated when you were on the opposition, but you knew you would love to have him on your team because you'd love to have him doing for your team what he's doing for their team. And he could also score goals. And that's the most annoying part. When you get a guy who can drive the other team to want to fight him, and of course he didn't fight very much. He found ways not to fight.
But he could fight when he fought.
But he didn't fight very often. And he didn't fight the heavyweights. But he could really annoy the other team and almost injure the other team, but then turn around and score a goal as well. He was the full package, but he was a ball of hate. There's no doubt about that.
In 1995, he scored 13 goals in helping lead the Devils to their first Stanley Cup and captured the Conn Smythe Trophy. Moved on to Colorado the next year, winning his third cup with his third different team, but will always be known for the blindside hit along the center ice sideboards on Chris Draper, which fractured almost Draper's entire face. He was suspended for the first two games of the final. And that vitriol between those two teams, the Avalanche and Red Wings, carried into the following season. And the next March, Darren McCarty exacted that retribution, beating Lemieux to a pulp, literally.
Yeah, and that's what Darren McCarty could do. And Detroit was really angry about what happened in that. I remember even right up to the governor's level, I was at the Board of Governors meeting, and Detroit was outraged by that hit.
And that was one of the real true white heat rivalries in the NHL that we still talk about today.
Yeah, the Colorado-Detroit rivalry was just a tremendous part of that period of time. Detroit was in the West at that time. So Colorado and Detroit had to fight to see who would get to the final. It wasn't like they could play each other in the final. One had to beat the other out to get to the final. It was intense.
Mew returned to New Jersey, winning a fourth cup in 2000. Then went on to play for Phoenix and Dallas. And he actually retired and then returned 5 years later, having been away from the game, to finish his career with San Jose in 2008-2009 at the age of 43. But now let's go back to the McCarty-Lemieux relationship, because their fights somewhat symbolized what that Red Wings Avalanche rivalry was and how intense it was. And you would think that maybe the hatred would last forever. But there was actually reconciliation between those two. And it started way before a lot of people realized, because while Lemieux was playing for Dallas in 2002-2003, McCarty was still with the Red Wings. And Lemieux came up to line up against McCarty for a face-off. And McCarty looked at him and said, "What the F do you want? You want to go again?" And this was at a time that McCarty was recovering from substance abuse. And Lemieux said to him, "No, I just want to say how happy I am that you're really being able to turn your life around here." And at that moment, McCarty had different feelings about Lemieux.
And that can so often happen in life with someone who you think you don't like or doesn't like you, and suddenly something gets said, a chance meeting happens, and you find out that all the things you thought about that guy, that girl, that person were actually wrong, and you end up having a relationship with them. So good for Darren McCarty, who's still with us, thankfully. Unfortunately, Claude Lemieux is not now, and he will be missed, no doubt about it. If it's only for the fact that we get to see him once in a while with that number 32 on to remind us what a great player he was.
McCarty and Lemieux went on to do autograph sessions and appearances together. And I think as McCarty found out, the player that you see on the ice was not the player that was off the ice. And I think we see that so often with hockey players in particular, that we get this image of players that are ruffians, that do things that are distasteful to the opposition, to the fans, to the media. And then off the ice, they are completely different people. And this is like Exhibit A here.
Most of the heavyweight tough guys from the old days, from the 90s, were the greatest guys off the ice, were the team favorites. They were guys that everybody loved to be around. I mean, Stu Grimson can be seen on NHL Network, and that is not the Stu Grimson that played for the Chicago Blackhawks and chased the Toronto Maple Leafs around the ice with no jersey, no shoulder pads, no elbow pads, threw the linesmen apart, threw the referees down, tried to get after the Leafs. I mean, these are guys that are complete orangutans when they're on the ice, and then off the ice, everybody wants to hang out with them because they're just nice guys. As I said just now, we'll miss Claude Lemieux and cherish the memories we have of him.
And, of course, at the end of the game last night, Frederik Andersen, who we'd said was represented by Lemieux, gave a nice tribute to Jackie Redmond, and it made it so human. You see Andersen in the net, making the final for the first time, I think answering to many detractors, perhaps myself even, but this was totally human here, and that's the biggest part of all in this.
Personally, I'm really glad for Freddie Andersen. I don't know him. I'm really happy for him, though, because I'm happy for anybody who's struggled, who's tried and wasn't able to get over a hump. And for Freddie Andersen, it was the third round, the conference final. He was never able to win. His numbers in the first two rounds have been exemplary, but not in that third round. And this is the first time for him to really put on quite a show in the conference final. And now the skeptics will be saying, yes, but can he do it in the final?
Well, he's certainly going to have his chance because the finals will open on Tuesday. All games, 8 o'clock Eastern on ABC in the United States and Sportsnet and CBC in Canada. The complete schedule, game 1 and 2, Tuesday and Thursday, June 2nd and 4th in Carolina. Series switches over to Vegas on Saturday, June 6th and Tuesday, June 9th. Then the if necessaries, Thursday, June 11th at Carolina, Sunday, June 14th at Vegas. And if we go the distance, Wednesday, June 17th in Carolina. So, Neil, we got a pretty good schedule coming up the next few days. On Sunday, we will do our Stanley Cup Final preview with Craig Button, so that'll be available late in the afternoon. On Monday, big get by you. We're going to have somebody that is familiar with both the Hurricanes and the Golden Knights from having coached in both conferences, and that's Jim Montgomery, the current coach of the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, and that'll be a fun discussion. What reminded me that maybe I should reach out to Jim was that seeing Rick Bowness do the desk on TNT there during the playoffs and how interesting it was to have the Columbus head coach on there. Last year he did it after being the Winnipeg head coach. I just think that you can't get a better perspective than that from a current head coach in the NHL. So I really look forward to seeing Monty for that show.
Tuesday, we'll have the spring cleaning for the Colorado Avalanche, and then Stanley Cupdate returns on Wednesday when Neil and I will recap Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll speak with you again with our Stanley Cup Final preview.